Well, welcome back to the Yosan University 39 Gen podcast. I have an awesome guest with me today. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell people who you are and a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, hello everybody. My name is Lisa Conboy. I am an epidemiologist, and I've been studying East Asian medicine mostly, but also other types of integrative medicines for about 30 years.
That's awesome. How did you get started in the field? What took you down that path?
Well, I was in my early 20s, and I was pursuing, actually, I was pre-med in college, and moved away from that. Mostly animal models really bothered me, and just some other things about practicing medicine. I wasn't really sure if that would be the thing for me. So I moved into medical sociology, which the branch that I was interested in, looking at the medical system and the culture and how society affects who gets access to what. So it's a lot about social disparities and health determinants and that kind of thing. And so I took a year off between college and grad school, and I stayed with my brother and sister-in-law in California for while I was there. But while I was there, I was working as a barista, and I'm having a really good time, going out playing pool at night and getting up in the morning and running. I was a runner then. And I got mono. And so I went to my regular doctor, and she said, well, eat better, don't run, sleep better, calm down. There's nothing we can really do for you. Just treat yourself better. And a friend of mine at the cafe where I worked as a barista, she said, you got to go see Dr. Pong. You got to go see my Chinese doctor. And, I wasn't, Chinese to me was a food. Like I knew very little about Chinese culture. I was, just wasn't exposed yet. And so my friend would not stop suggesting this idea. So, she's pretty convincing. So I did go. I went to see Dr. Pong, and, he, you go into the medical interview. First of all, beautiful home office. It was in, Palo Alto, California. So around Stanford University. And, it was a hot day, and you go into his office, and it was all tile, and there's a big fish tank, and everything's calm, and very different than going into many biomedical offices, but some are calm like that too. We had the medical interview. I was super impressed with all the different things he asked. Like no one has ever asked me, let alone a doctor, about tastes in my mouth or what my dreams are like, or these things that just from coming from sociology, I know that there's a lot that influences our health that may not be what the blood looks like or what the muscles look like. Is more than physiology. So I was super just interested. Like, what is he asking these things for? And I was almost concerned that he's going to find something out about me, that I'm actually really sick because I have a metal taste in my mouth or something like that. So it came up in the medical interview that I was amenorrheic. I'd never had a period, and I was 23, I guess, then. And when I was a teenager, my mom took me to the gynecologist when I didn't get a period, and they put me on, they tested my hormones. My hormones are fine. But the way they treated amenorrhea then is give you big doses of female hormones. So I've been given a lot of hormones and just gained a lot of weight, didn't bring a period. And by the time I went to college, I just stopped taking them because nobody was there to make me take them anymore. So, years later, I'm now with Dr. Pong, telling him about the amenorrhea. He writes it down like it's any old thing. Just like another part of my interview. And so then we get on, he finishes up his interview, we get on the table, and he's putting the needles in. I'd never been needled before. So he put needles in my, starts at the top and moved down. So I had needles in my hand, and I was lying back, and I was trying to see if they'd fall out. I was tipping my hand like this. And he came back to the head of the table, and he tapped my hand and brought it back to the table, and he said, we'll take care of the period too. And I fell asleep, because I usually fall asleep when I have a treatment. But I remember thinking on the way out, before I fell asleep, no, you won't. You don't know what I've been through, all the hormones I've been on. Your little needles are not going to help me. And 2 weeks later, I had a period. And that was with herbs. So, it wasn't just the needling, but I was intrigued. I was like, what? Like, how does this work? What's going on? And I just wanted to learn more. So I spoke with some Chinese doctors, some acupuncturists, everybody, my whole career, acupuncturists have been so kind to me, explaining things. Um, and I told them my situation, and I said, I could either become a practitioner or I could go into research, because I was already a researcher anyway. That was my bent when I was in sociology. And they all said, if you don't really have a calling to be a clinician, you shouldn't, because you really need the calling. And also, there aren't a lot of people doing research that's respectful to medicine. So why don't you go do that? So that's what I went and did.
That's amazing. You've done a lot of research studying traditional medicine and complex health systems. What unique challenges and opportunities do you see when conducting research on acupuncture and East Asian medicine?
Well, I'll name some things, but I have to say the situation is much, much better than it was 30 years ago. So,
Yeah.
you still see it sometimes, pick up a newspaper, or it's oftentimes like a secondary data magazine, something like a Forbes or even Atlantic Monthly sometimes. Um, you'll get an author doesn't, that isn't looking to, and I don't want to say they're not looking to understand, but um, it's worldview. And let's start with
Yeah.
that. It's worldview. So, different cultures. I get this from sociology. Different cultures have different ways of putting the world together. Meaning is super important, not just to what we see, but what we support as a society, what we support as a culture. Um, and I think the difference in worldview is really the one that I don't want to say causes the most trouble, but causes is the root of a lot of confusion, because Chinese medicine. I mean, there are multiple schools and multiple models. I'm just gonna. I guess I'll focus on TCM because that's the one I'm probably most familiar with. Um, they look at the body as a holistic, complete system, and you can
Mm.
affect that system in different ways through multiple modalities. You can use herbs, you can use Tuina, you can use movement. And 30 years ago, that wasn't even common to recommend within biomedicine, but now it is. Now we talk more about um, holistic health and whole person health. The VA, the Veterans Health Administration, has their version of that. The NIH office or institute that works on alternative medicine things or integrative medicine things talks about whole person health. So we're now in a really great place that the medicines, I think, they've been talking pretty well to each other for the last 30 years,
Mhm.
with some disagreements, and not disagreements, but just almost talking past each other, because
Mm.
the way they look at the world is different. But I think we're in a really exciting time when we can work on, um, uh, I'm not sure sometimes if we want a single medicine that incorporates everything, or if we should have multiple types of available systems that people can choose
Mm.
from, or we somehow work with. I kind of go towards the latter because I'm not really sure the former is possible, but it might be. Wasn't Star Trek. There was one medicine that in Bones's diagnostic tool that he had. But I think for where we are right now, we still don't understand how Chinese medicine works. We still don't understand completely how Ayurveda works. So while we're trying to figure out how things are happening, um, I think it's good to have experts in different fields trying to talk with each other.
That's awesome. Do you think students and faculty at schools like Yosan or other schools should get more involved in meaningful acupuncture research? Is this something that people should be getting involved in?
Well, a big reason why, if you look at my resume, I've been doing research studies, but I've also been teaching in
Yeah.
Chinese medicine schools for over 20 years. And that's a big part of what, when I first saw how in the early 90s, when I first saw how Chinese medicine was being studied some of those early studies are really good.
Yeah.
You clearly have a Chinese medicine person on the author list, and they decided how to do things. But there was also a lot of just awful. There was no attempt made to even understand Chinese medicine as its own thing. Very disrespectful in a certain way. Not that respect is the do all end all, but if you get a study in the end that the acupuncture didn't work, well, if you didn't study a protocol that makes any sense to a Chinese medicine person, well, then you actually didn't study acupuncture, did you? You just
Mm,
you studied needles going into the skin, which is a different question. Um, but even at the time when I first started thinking about this communication between the different medicines, there was, some energy then and also much more energy now of this idea, well, we're going to educate um, the CAM people. We're going to educate the acupuncturists. We're going to educate the Ayurvedic people. We're going to educate the chiropractors how to do science right, science the way we do it. And there is a right way to, I understand things are normative. There's a right way to do. I've done RCT, randomized controlled trials myself. I think it's super model if you have certain questions. Um, but what about the actual practitioners getting to decide how they want to study things?
mm,
Then you have an individual that knows how to do science and knows the Chinese medicine model. That's perfect to have that viewpoint come in, right? So that's a big reason why I didn't leave Harvard, but I really took my full time into a Chinese medicine school in 2002, so that I could really focus on helping students see like there are many, many ways to do science. And
mm.
some of those really overlap with the way, and they are the way that Chinese medicine was developed. Just observational case report, case series, single arm trials. I mean, those are, to an epidemiologist, those are perfectly valid methods. And so there was that. And also, I wanted the practitioners, the new practitioners are coming up, because when I talked to them, they always had this, well, biomedicine doesn't quite get us, or we're not respected in the same way, or um, it was almost like they felt not insecure, but like they didn't want to participate in the larger conversation with biomedicine because they're not going to get us anyway. So I thought,
Mm,
well, what if maybe they would, maybe if you knew what they were coming from, and maybe if they knew
mhm.
where you were coming from, that's all it does. That's all you need to start. So that was really the bent that I took when I first started teaching. And it wasn't, thanks to a really great friend, she's no longer with us, someone I met at Harvard, Kathy Kerr, um, much better teacher than I was, more experienced, certainly when we first started. She co-taught with me the first year. And I was trying to give them a bunch of slides and here's the different types of validity and like all this stuff that if you're not going to be a scientist, you probably don't ever need to know. So with
Yeah,
Kathy's help, we made the class much more experiential, project based, and I could really step into that thing that I believed, which is I respect you so much. If I had better bedside manner, I would have become a practitioner, but I don't. So I'm here to show you ways that you can participate in this conversation if you want to. Yeah.
I love that. As students go out and start designing, a capstone or thesis project, what advice do you have for them so that they can design one that's a good study, that bridges traditional knowledge and also evidence-based research? How can they put something together that's really a good a good project, a good capstone?
Um, well, first, this is sounds, and it is obvious. You got to like it because you're going to be working
Right.
with that subject matter for at least a year, right? Um, and there's so many things. I mean, if you gave me an hour, I could come up with 40 different studies that I'd like to do. So there's so many things you can do that are interesting, but you only have a set amount of time. Um, so then it is look at what you think is missing from the literature. That's kind of the easiest thing to do. Like what is, I don't say easy, but it kind of writes itself because you can see what's missing. You can think about how to fill that gap, and then you just choose a methodology and fulfill the methodology. It's in some ways, I think research is much, much easier than clinical care. It's
Mm,
much more straightforward. It can get more complex if you do complex modeling, but a lot of the statistical models that are used to in medical research that get the stuff that goes and gets into National Library of Medicine, um, pretty simple models asking pretty simple comparative questions. Um, so there's that. If you want to go in the statistical direction, but the other thing with because these students are training to be clinicians, do a case study, do a case series, do an observational trial, do a
Yeah.
systematic review. You don't have to get out there and touch new people to get information from them. And I would argue we don't even need more research that Chinese medicine works. We need it.
Mm.
We need people to hear about it in a different way, and hear reports on it in a better way. We have thousands of years of research on how Chinese medicine works. If we choose to think about the Chinese medicine model as something that can be tested. So for students, make sure you really like it. And which is how do you know in the beginning if you really like something? But just, if you
Right.
have a feeling towards it, um, and then, don't make it too big. You can, a case reports are not the smallest step, but they're a step that some scientists don't even think case reports are research,
Really.
because they're not generalizable. You can't, it's only one person. A case series, it's only a few people, and it's not controlled, and it's not perspective necessarily, depending on when you started. So, um, and yeah, it's like that you can definitely have a lot more of the author's influence in a case study, but you have a lot author's influence in any study design. Um, so students, I gotta love it. Keep it small if you want to, and there's so much data that's readily available. You don't necessarily have to collect your own to have a really good outcome. Yeah.
You touched on something. You said there's like 40 different research projects that you would love to. If you could do one, tell me one or two. What would be something that you would really enjoy researching?
Well, this is one that I'm working on, and I'm not sure how well it's gonna turn out, but it seems like a good idea. So um, the Chinese medicine herbs are. It's very difficult in this country to study individualized herbal formulas. There have been some great studies um, in Western journals that have done that. Um, but something I'm working on right now is how can we create a resource for acupuncture scientists or herbal scientists to do individualized um, treatment studies without. Well, right now you can't use individualized products. You can't do individualized formulas without showing the FDA um, safety, effectiveness, where it came from, all these different fields that are really important
Mm.
for safety, right? So the scientist that wants to do individualized formulas has to gather all that information for the FDA, get the FDA's approval before they can even start the science. There's no funding, at least nationally, I mean federally right now, for that initial step. So
Mm.
scientists aren't doing it. They're not. I mean, you don't make a ton of money usually doing science anyway. So to
Yeah.
do 18 months of you looking through the medical literature to um, give the FDA what they need and validly need, I don't think that's a bad idea. Um, but trying to figure out ways to make that first step easier, and so then clinician scientists can step in and say, "Oh, good, we know what these fields are. I want these 40 herbs, or I want these 60 herbs to treat my thing." Um, and that's the one that I really hope that I see soon.
That's
Um,
awesome. One of the things that I'd seen, like a lot of people, I don't know why, but a lot of students have gotten not nervous, but some people get a little bit overwhelmed with the research, and they get a little bit like, well, we don't have to do the research. It works. It just
right.
works, and it does work, but being able to share with people why and how is powerful. How can we, um, how can students and practitioners learn to embrace research as part of their healing journey?
Well, I think um, I've had so many students, smart students, like stand up like halfway through my class and say, I came here for Chinese medicine school. Why are you telling me what biomedicine does? Like, I don't,
Mm.
exactly as you said, like, we learn why herbs work from a Chinese medicine standpoint. They work. We don't need to know biomedically why they work. So, completely agree with them. Like, I get it. I get it. But we live in a culture that doesn't understand what you're talking about yet.
Yeah.
So, unfortunately, if you want them to understand what you're talking about, knowing just a little bit about biomedicine will help you be able to do that. And also, and I try to stay away from broad sweeping generalizations, but I've met so few acupuncturists that weren't. Let me say that in a better way. So it's double negative. Every student I've ever worked with has been fantastic. People
Yeah.
come to this profession; it's a choice. They may have they want to be a healer, and they go, well, where should I do this from? Or they had they had a profound experience, or their parents had a profound, or someone they love had a profound experience. It isn't that they're lesser than medical students, biomedical students. They made a choice, and
Yeah.
they shouldn't feel secondary. They should feel like they can stand up in a room of medical professionals and talk about their science, and be understood. So it's like I don't want to say weapon, but it's a tool. It's a safety
I
tool.
love that. I
Um,
love that.
so you won't be discredited. And that's like one of the best things when a former student of mine comes up and tells me about some holiday dinner party or some situation where someone came up and said, there's no research on acupuncture. And they go, oh, but wait a minute, there is. And people just don't know. Um, but it isn't, I don't believe that one meaning system is better than the other. And I don't teach them that one meaning system is better than the other. It's just different worldviews. They're different meaning systems. Yeah.
I love that. I live in Asia, and if I'm giving my wife some herbs and I tell her this is going to clear heat and clear wind, she's like, okay, yeah, clear heat and clear wind. But if I go to my mom or dad and this is going to clear heat and clear wind, and my mom's like, my mom's an RN, and she's like, what does that mean?
Right.
It is really about learning to speak another language of sorts, and having that research is powerful because it's all about helping people shift perspectives, and to see things in a new light. And if you can shift someone's perspective in a gentle, nice, simple way, they're probably going to be more receptive in the long run.
My mom was an RN too. She died a few years ago, but actually, she was good. She tried acupuncture a few times, but the herbs, why do I need to take six? I mean, didn't even try the raw herbs, right? We just like got the patents, and I totally understood, like a different meaning system, Mom. I said, Mom, it's more like food. And she's
Yeah.
like, well, okay, then, but it wasn't, she was good at her job. She understood biomedicine really well. She was, yeah. So it's almost harder to convince someone that has a lot of medical knowledge. Um,
Right.
it depends on the person. And it's not, I don't think it's negative. I mean, people
No.
hang on to their, people hang on to their belief systems. That's what they do. But as you said, that softness, what is it that water can erode anything? Water can, yeah, the, the strongest force is water.
And
Yeah.
be like water. It was Lao Tzu originally, I think, had the first quote, but then Bruce Lee kind of popularized it. But it's powerful because we are many acupuncturists are operating in a system that speaks a different language, and if they can. What was it? I was talking to my daughter yesterday that when you say things in a way that is someone can be receptive to, you're much more likely to get a positive result. If I see someone texting while driving and I look over at them, hey, you idiot, put your phone down, man. They probably aren't going to take that so good. But if I say, hey, you know what? Oh, I saw some police right over there. Even if I didn't, I saw some police over there. You know what? You might want to put your phone down to not have something bad happen, or just to keep people safe. And it's like, again, it's a context thing, and I think that you have everyone. I think most people are receptive to things, but we speak different languages, and I love that idea. I was reading through some of your work, your bios, and it was talking about complex systems thinking. Can you talk to me a little bit of what is that?
Sure. It's a umbrella of a lot of different disciplines, are using more and more kind of, you see it in the scientific literature across many sciences. Physics is the one that people usually think of, but it's in biology and different types of biology, microbiology. macrobiology. This idea that we live in the world is a series of embedded systems.
Mm,
So the person is a system. There are levels within me. There's a circulatory system and um, even different organs. So what does that mean? So it means that we're alive. It means
hmm.
that um, so what does alive mean? There's
Right.
this constant flux. It's We're movement. Life is movement. And rather than imagine, I remember when I was in college, we were told that we don't build new neurons in your brain after a certain period, a certain age. They just keep dying. It's like, what an awful model. Like, you wouldn't. And first of all, how could that possibly be true? Because if I think of a new idea, that's a synapse, isn't it?
Yeah.
Um, so this idea of life, of living systems, is a big part of a lot of complexity thinking. But some disciplines don't have that, the idea of that the system is necessarily alive. But what complex systems encourages you to think about is the not just the different things you want to measure, the different constructs, but the relationships between things.
Yeah.
So it's such a strength of Chinese medicine is looking at how that person that day comes into the practitioner's office, and their context is not irrelevant. They're not. If
Yeah.
someone comes in with gastrointestinal issues that look like IBS to a Western scientist, that IBS is in that person is not the same as the IBS in someone else necessarily.
Yeah.
Probably not, unless you maybe took everybody with IBS, maybe. But um, biomedicine is fantastic. I have got two fake hips. My sister-in-law is alive because of a medication that was developed. Um, really, the really, really good ideas. And I mean, that's in my life, not just, nationally and internationally. Um, but an idea that's coming up more in biomedicine, macrobiology, physics, chemistry is that we can have truths that are, this at one point in time, like in a randomized controlled trial. Um, if you say you have a pharmaceutical versus a placebo pill, well, if you have 300 people in the study and it looks like the drug does 10% better than the placebo pill, then yes, that we can say that that pharmaceutical appears to, at this point, maybe be better than the placebo, at least probably better than, we can say that above chance.
Hmm.
Um, but what about all the different ways that illness manifests in different people, or
Yeah.
the different ways that that illness can be influenced, um, and the different ways that pharmaceutical can be influenced. The randomized controlled trial holds things. That's what makes it so powerful. It holds things in time and tries to
Yeah.
remove context. So you can look at single relationships, which that's good. But what do you do with all those single relationships? If you go
Right.
in the end, try to add them up. Well, this piece and that piece and this piece, it must be equal 100, or it must, you know, two pills must be greater than, must have more of an effect than one pill.
Mm,
Maybe, but there are tons of examples that that's not how things work. So um, there may be other feedback loops, and tipping points is a beautiful idea and I think a lot of people have felt this. If you're starting a new exercise routine or any sort of habit change, at first it's hard to get yourself to
yeah.
do the new thing, and then at some point it's like you're just doing the new thing.
Hmm.
And in complexity science, there's this idea of attractor states or tipping points. There's different terms that kind of point to the same similar ideas that as organisms, we have resting places. I build a certain person with my food and my thoughts and my behaviors. But if I change food, thought, behaviors, all these other things, I can find another resting state that's easy for the organism to maintain. Um,
Wow.
so, what is complexity science? It's about relationships. It's about, if you're in this type of science, thinking about things being alive. Think about things having intelligence. That bodies have intelligence. Bodies know how to heal. You don't necessarily need complexity science to think that, but it's oftentimes in the medical literature, not really so much now, but the doctors and scientists that wrote about intelligence in the body or self-healing were sometimes laughed at. Like,
Yeah.
no, body's a machine. There's no intelligence in there. Your thoughts don't have anything to do with it. Well, they might. So and that's the thing. Like, why don't we just biomedical technology is fantastic. Let's study Chinese medicine with it.
Yeah.
Rather than try to morph it into something that looks more like biomedical techniques.
I'm always fascinated by, and when you were talking, it got me thinking about this intelligence in systems. And the one thing that has always blown me away is like the orchid mantis. It's
Mhm.
this little praying mantis that looks just like an orchid. And and I sat there and I just was sitting there looking at it. I was like, there's got to be some type of intelligence in this system to make this thing evolve to look this way. And I've always been fascinated by that. And I'm sure there are people studying these things, but you know, to see in Chinese medicine, they have the concept of the different, the one thing reflects a larger thing, so like, you eat a walnut because it reflects the shape of the brain. You do these different things. You eat a food that is, you know, shaped like was it one of the ones that was interesting was like, spring onions, and they're shaped like a little vessel that, wind could travel through, and there's all these fascinating things like that. So interesting.
And to look at a whole structure, like a whole green onion or a whole um I didn't know about the mantis. What is it called again?
The
The
orchid mantis. Have you not
orchid
seen that? They're
I've
so
not seen it.
fascinating.
I have to
It
go.
looks just like it just looks like an orchid. It's wild.
But rather than trying to take those things apart, oh, let's dissect it and see. But look at it as it is, the early biology, like Darwin. He just observed things. I mean, he did do
Yeah,
some studies eventually, but I mean, start with what's actually happening right in front of you, and rather than try to take it apart first.
I love that. Now, there was something that you said right at the beginning of the conversation that was fascinating to me, and it talked about your background in sociology. And as someone with a background in public health and sociology, how do you see acupuncture and East Asian medicine contributing to broader community health or public health initiatives?
Wow, what a great question. So, a big reason why I went into public health because I could have stayed in sociology and done my degree, got learned the math and stuff like that in sociology. But I really wanted to get into public health, learn epidemiology because that system's closer or more accepted probably in biomedicine.
Hmm.
But the more I read, the more I talked to people, the more I saw my own um, experience and other people's experience. It was it became clear to me, and I still believe this, that a lot of the CAMs, the complementary alternative medicines, um, they're cheap and they're cheaper and they're effective and they're sustainable. And that's
Yeah.
something that World Health Organization has been saying, at least with acupuncture since 70s at least. Um, and now we see other, um, even like as I said, the VA is using it. It's and there are more and more cost effectiveness studies with acupuncture coming out. Um, I think, and this was my dissertation was on this actually. I looked at a big data set, one of the first big data sets of just telephone um, survey, national telephone survey of the United States, and it was by David Eisenberg he was his data, the principal investigator, and I looked to see if social factors had anything to do with use. And at the time, people were like, "It doesn't matter. Alternative medicine is
Mm.
that thing that those weirdos do that has nothing to do with anything, and it's a social problem." There were actually things written when I first started. These CAMs are so they didn't call them CAMs. These alternative medicines were a social problem, and we have to fix that social problem.
Wow.
Um, and I think there's a lot of potential there. And there were different organizations. Now the American Pub- American Public Health Association has a special interest group in complementary and traditional medicine. As I said, we have the NIH office has been open for a number. Institute has been open for a number of years. Um, and there are other federal and local organizations that are looking at how the um, I just call them. I guess I should call them integrative medicine systems because that's the term now. But um, I keep thinking integrating into what? Like that's a whole other ball of wax. Let's just talk about Chinese medicine. Um, I think it's a way that we can make healthcare, good quality healthcare, accessible in a system that doesn't support everybody.
So interesting because, there was, I had a professor that came in and he was talking about some of the barefoot doctors that were going out and treating the people that, needed help and they just couldn't afford it, and being here in Asia, like I see so many people still going to acupuncturists and herbalists, and when they can't afford or are not getting the results from Western medicine that they wanted, or it might just be that it's a different type of treatment. There was my father-in-law went in to see someone for his back. He was dealing with some back issues, and they were like, "Yeah, we can treat that." And they're like, "Okay, how?" And they're like, "Surgery. We're gonna do this, and some fusion." And he was just like, and again, there's no judgment on that. It was a treatment modality that was presented to him, and he says, "I don't want to go through that right now. I don't want to have vertebra fused." And he went to an acupuncturist who started doing moxa and acupuncture on different points on his back, and he's been moving like he was 25, and he just felt so good about it, and it gave him an option versus someone saying this is your only option, and that ability to have an option that was cost effective was powerful. It's super powerful.
And then the other part of the complexity science that comes in here is when you affect one part of the system, other parts will be affected. So
Hmm.
his practitioner was working on, your dad's practitioner was working on the pain in the back, or was he or she? Maybe he or she was
Right.
working on the flow of it, and then other things get better, sleep gets better. That aspect is something that there are newer models coming up of how to do, but it's not multiple things at once, but finding that base thing that's changing. So not base, common thing that's changing and how that affects, how then systemically affects other um, perceptions of health, feelings, how different organs work, um, how you can change at a sort of like hub level, a core level, and how it radiates out rather than changing that symptom, like fusing the vertebra.
Yeah.
And as you said, they both have validity, but does fusing the vertebra, does it affect other things too? I don't know. In a good way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting too because what you were talking about there with the connectedness of the systems is something, in acupuncture we'd love to look at the root versus the branch. What is that core root that is causing all these other things? I had a great guest on the podcast that teaches facial acupuncture, and what she was pointing out, she says people come to me for facial acupuncture, but what's interesting is that very quickly they start getting whole body treatments, and it's not that she's still doing the same points, but they're coming in and saying, well, I was having insomnia. I didn't talk about that, but after I got this facial acupuncture, the insomnia went away. And they're like, are you treating that? And she's like, well, we're treating your whole body. We're treating everything. And it was just really powerful to hear about these people that were, you know, you put a needle here and all of this stuff shifts as well.
Yeah. I'm working with my brother and sister-in-law. They're molecular biologists at Berkeley, and they study longevity.
That's awesome.
Um, so there's such an overlap with your medicine. I mean, um, you just have to look at a room full of acupuncturists to know there's something going on there with longevity. Like they all look young and they're all look springy, and um, so we're working together. They analyzed some blood samples from a previous study of mine, and we're working on another study now, trying to look at how with biomedical or biological markers we can consider if how acupuncture might help people feel better and maybe live longer.
Mm, so powerful. Well, it leads me to one or two last questions, but like this one is looking forward, what do you hope to see for the next generation of acupuncturists and researchers? Like, especially those graduating from some of these acupuncture schools, what are you hoping that they start tackling or looking at?
Well, first I want to say I don't know if this is true at Yosan, but I'm the I work with ASA. I'm in the American Society of Acupuncturists. I'm the research committee chair, Society for Acupuncture Research. I'm involved with them for a number of years, and there's some fear now that the schools are all closing and Chinese medicine might go away. Um, and I got to say, when I started my career in this area, my Ted Kapchik was one of my well-known Chinese medicine practitioner and scientist, was one of my mentors, and I used to get so mad. I'd be like, "Oh, they're going to take the Chinese medicine away, and they're not studying it right." And he'd say, "Lisa, Chinese medicine has been around for thousands of years. Okay, it's not going anywhere. It adapts, right? So calm down. It just let it adapt." And I can't see into the future, but that made me feel better, and I remind myself of it daily. That calm down. Being angry is not going to change anything anyway, and you're supporting the best hero ever, because this hero has been around for thousands of years and will continue to be. Um, but probably we'll see more and more degrees that are maybe nursing and acupuncture, or different, like some sort of co-degree might become more common. Um, but I don't think the system is going anywhere. And then what kind of science? Um, the A really low hanging fruit is to do some big data set analysis. So many of the people, that practitioners that are members of American Society of Acupuncturists, ASA, use the same electronic health record program. I don't know if I should say the name, because y'all know what it is anyway. I don't want to do any advertising for you, but if we got um, a little bit of funding, we could look at so many different things and just collect what those clinicians are doing real world. There's no RCT. There's no do this point protocol. Let's look exactly what people are doing. And if we had even a tenth of the practitioners in the United States who use that program sharing their data with us, we could learn so many things really quickly, and do that type of modeling that is used more in complexity science, looking at multiple things changing at once, rather than this. Let's look for 6 months what this drug does. We can actually see in real world. And then, not that that should be the end, but it may point to new questions. And that strictly observational work, I think, is something that we could easily do with only a little bit of funding. And a lot of practitioners could participate. And rather than, as when we started, we were talking about clinicians and students will say, well, research isn't relevant. Well, let's do research that's relevant. You did this work. Let's look at what you did. And we've published some studies on treatments from the student clinic at my old school, New England School of Acupuncture. And we really weren't sure at the beginning. We're like, is this going to work? Should we show that students, statistically significant improvements in pain? And these are students that just learned how to put a needle in like last year. So trust in the medicine, and I guess once again, start small and just observational. We can make this, we can show the validity of this medicine or not. Or maybe we're at a time where something different should come. But historically, it's molded and modified and showed itself to be useful for a long time. And I think that's what's going to continue to happen.